Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to session number 416 of Humanity Rising. I want to welcome everyone who's coming in from different parts of the world as we contemplate day by day what is happening in human affairs. And today I wanted to touch on the issue of the Ukraine. I was trying to think of another word besides issue because it's a crisis, what's happening really in the Ukraine today. And as I've done from time to time in Humanity Rising, in the spirit of Socrates and truth pursued rather than truth possessed, knowing that we're all like the blind men looking at the elephant, I want to just challenge for just a minute or so the prevailing narrative that people certainly in Western Europe and the United States and around the world are being given in the mainstream media about what's happened and the prospects for the future. I'm delighted to announce today that we're going to be having Vladimir Posner on next week. He's considered the most eminent journalist in Russia. He's fluent in Russian and French and English, having lived in France and the United States for many, many years. And he's one of those few people who can translate between cultures. So we'll have him on sometime next week. We're just working out the details. But because everything is at such a knife's edge in the Ukraine, as we speak, I wanted to ask the fundamental question, which may be challenging to some of you, I know, but as we think of the Ukraine today, let us ask the question whether is it Russia that is being the aggressor, or is it NATO and the United States? And I think that's a very important question just for us to contemplate as we watch the news, because what we're being told is happening in the opinion of many people, including the last ambassador to the Soviet Union, Jack Matlock, who has been on alternative news sources over the last couple of days. Is the opposite of what we're being told. It's very important to remember a few historical facts, and I'll just very briefly provide them, and then we'll commence into our program. But because the Ukraine is in the news so much right now, it's very important that we have a wider context. Throughout history, Russia has never invaded Western Europe. What's happened is that on two occasions, once with Napoleon in the early part of the 19th century, and then secondly with Hitler in 1941, Western European nations have invaded Russia and caused catastrophic damage to the cities and to the people, with tens of millions of people being killed. 20 million people alone in the Second World War were killed, who were Russian citizens. And after the Second World War, Russia stayed in the areas where it had consolidated influence as the Americans from the West and the Russians from the East squeezed the German army. And that was the initiation of the Cold War that went on for many, many decades, as you know, until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And I happened to be very intimately involved at that time, going back and forth to Moscow. I actually had an apartment in Moscow. I knew Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin and many of the players. I met Vladimir Putin at that time. And the agreement that was reached by the President of the United States, George Bush Sr., and the Secretary of State, James Baker, with Gorbachev. The tacit understanding was that if the Soviet Union withdrew from Eastern Europe back to Russia, that the United States and NATO would not move to the east. Now think about that. That makes sense, because after 2 invasions from Western Europe into Russia, the Russians wanted a buffer. But that was not to be. And even though there was that understanding, the hawks in the United States, the ones that believed that at the end of the Cold War, the United States should rule the world supreme as the only superpower, they won the day in the geostrategic discussions, and NATO began to move to the east. It's very important to remember, and Vladimir Posner will be saying more about this, that when Vladimir Putin became president of Russia some 22 years ago, around the year 2000, he proposed what Gorbachev had proposed, what Yeltsin had proposed. He said, if there's no more Cold War, why don't we just have one European market? Why doesn't Russia join NATO and have a European security zone where the security of one is the security of all? But again, it was the United States that said, no, we want to be supreme. And so if you look at a map, you'll see that NATO has gone all the way the Baltics, Poland, Hungary, and consolidated the sphere of influence. And if you know where Ukraine is, Ukraine juts into Russia. And NATO now wants to move into the Ukraine. There's a lot of turbulence in the Ukraine. And Russia has said no. And it's very important, and I'll close with this, but I just want people to just think about the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the 1960s, where Russia was going to put missiles in Cuba, 90 miles off the coast of the United States, and the United States was willing to go to nuclear war to keep the Russian missiles out of Cuba. Just imagine, those of you who are Americans, if Russia and Canada or Russia and Mexico started to have a military economic treaty, the United States would go to war. And the same thing applies to the Russians. And so when we think about what's going on there and the volatility of what's going on, it's very important that we hold current events in the larger historical context and not succumb to a lot of, quite literally, the propaganda that is being orchestrated by governments through the mainstream media. And it's another example of a theme that we've raised many, many times on Humanity Rising. In order for humanity to rise, we have to question prevailing narratives. We have to question the conventional wisdom and ask the deeper questions of what is the real reason why the Russians are so upset about Ukraine and the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. And I would encourage all of you to just look at a map. And as you understand the larger geostrategic historical processes, I think we'll come to a deeper understanding that maybe the answer to who is the aggressor in the Ukraine is not the Russians, but the United States. And I know that's a hard thing to even contemplate for many of you. But I want to just put it out again in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed, so that as we move together as a community, we're courageous enough to ask deep questions about who we are at this moment in history and why we're in such a mess and why we are unable to solve some of the fundamental issues and challenges besetting us. And it's because we can't come together because we keep repeating narratives and storylines that have led to war and aggression so many times before. So again, we'll have more on the Ukraine as events unfold. I will be announcing the time when Vladimir Posner and others, we're trying to get others, people inside the Ukraine that have a different point of view, so that on Humanity Rising, we can, like the blind men and the elephant, look at the elephant, our current reality, from many points of view, in a spirit of tolerance and mutuality and deep respect. So that's just a little report from the Ukraine today, perspective that I hope that you will consider in the coming days. Let us pause now for a moment before we commence our program, and let us just center ourselves with all the commotion in the world around us. Let us just center ourselves in our bodies. Let us close our eyes and listen to our heartbeat. And in communing with our own hearts, let us commune with the hearts of everyone on this program today, everyone listening all over the world. If we come together through our hearts, we feel the oneness that if we could experience completely, would solve so many of the problems that are caused by the divisions of ignorance and prejudice and hostility. Thank you, everyone. It's so good, whatever's happening, to commune with all of you with an open heart, with an appreciation for human diversity, and the fact that at this moment in history, we have massive challenges before us that require us to feel our way into the future. And that's what we want to contemplate today, is how do we feel our way into the future? We started the program yesterday with 2 sessions that are being convened by the Next Generation Foresight practitioners from around the world, a network, a community that is empowering young people all over the world to take action, to both understand the future and shape the future in very powerful way. And so today we want to turn to the continent of Africa. And we want to contemplate the future of digital technology with 4 young people that are engaged with the Next Gen Foresight Practitioners Group, and will be sharing their experiences today. To convene the program, I want to welcome Pasi Agolia from Kenya, who's a part of NGFP. And so, Pasi, I want to turn the program over to you with a very, very warm welcome. Anyone who can see the future and help shape it is someone we want to have on Humanity Rising. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you for the insights and perspective. That was very, very powerful. Reminded me of a book I picked up some years ago, Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall.
Yes.
A very, very powerful book. So thank you for that. And definitely I will be keeping those thoughts into my mind. I'm very honored to be part of this platform today, and not just me, but also with the incredible panel that we have here today. So as Jim mentioned, my name is Pasi Agolia, and I am the Africa Network Weaver at the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network in Africa, which is a network hosted by the School of International Futures. We are very honored to be joining you today and sharing our journey and the work that we have done around digital futures in Africa. So joined by me today on this panel, and I'll ask them to unmute themselves at some point and say hello, and also switch on their camera so that we can all interact with you. Dears, we have with us Iman Bashir from PowerShift Africa and an NGFP African Network member from Kenya. She'll be telling us a little bit about herself. So welcome, Iman. We also have with us Memunat Ibrahim from Nigeria, who's also one of our members from the African Network. And we have Fisayo Oyewale from Nigeria as well. Now, just a little bit of background context before I allow our panelists today to introduce themselves. Over the past couple of months, from 2021 January, we have been coming together as a network of emerging leaders, change makers, and innovators from different parts of the continent to not only connect, but to find opportunities to envision a different future for the continent and for our children's children, but also begin to plant the seeds in different spaces so that they can germinate and really provide that desirable future that we want in the different parts of our continent. So far, we have 166 members across different sectors and geographies. And the one thing that glues us together is the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Award, which is an award that is given every year, calling upon young people from around the world to share with the world the innovative projects that are solving issues, challenges in the present day, but have an impact in the future generations' livelihoods. So without any further ado, I want to invite you, Iman, to be the first one to introduce yourself to us. Tell us about what you do at PowerShift Africa and what really is that one thing that sets you apart. Iman.
Thank you so much, Pasi, for the introduction. And thank you, Jim, for laying out the historical context that many people may not be aware of. My name is Iman Bashir, and I am from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm an environmental scientist and a lawyer based here in Nairobi. I work with PowerShift Africa, as Pasi said, and I'm excited to be part of this panel and to be speaking with this amazing group of people. At PowerShift Africa, my work is around climate policy and influencing international climate discourse to ensure that the African voice is not only amplified, but it is heard and it is input in decisions made at an international level, because as we all know, Africa is one of the least responsible for the climate crisis that we have ongoing, with less than 4% emissions historically. And unfortunately, Africa is always the most impacted when it comes to the situations because of its inherent vulnerability to climate issues. So my work is around bringing these issues to the forefront when it comes to climate change and ensuring that Africa has a future to look forward to. Thank you, Pasi.
Thank you, Iman. I want to invite you, Memunat, to also give us a brief introduction, who you are, where you're joining from, what it is that you're doing, and the spaces in which you have interest and influence presently. Memunat.
Thank you, Pasi, and thank you everyone for having us here. I'm Memunat. I'm from Nigeria. I'm currently joining from Australia. I'm a software engineer, but I'm currently doing a PhD at the School of Cybernetics in the Australian National University. I'm doing my PhD on autonomous vehicles design. How do you design autonomous vehicles to ensure that when they are deployed in African societies, their behavior are safe and their design is responsible too. So my interests are currently in responsible systems design, exploring systems at scale, cybernetics, and thinking about like systems of systems and their behavior and the potential impacts of that at scale.
Thank you so much, Memunat, for that intro. Finally, Fisayo Oyewale. When you're not engaged in the NGFP African Networks activities, what is it that you're engaged in? Please tell us about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Pasi, and thank you everyone for having us. My name is Fisayo Oyewale, and I am dialing in from Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria to be precise. So other times I'm not involved with NGFP Africa Networks activities and projects. I am probably busy on the farm. But right about now, I am currently having my postgrad program in technology entrepreneurship and design at the Nigerian University of Technology and Management, but with a background in agriculture and knowledge around technology. I'm trying to see what kind of development can we begin to look into, can we begin to birth, and then ensure that all of these are actually sustainable, and what are like the policies that we can bring around them. So when you don't catch me thinking about futures, I'm probably on the farm trying to contribute to food security. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Now, the one thing that brings these three incredible ladies together this morning is a project that we did together with the support of Omidyar Network in March 2021. And it was a group futures process bringing 22 NGFP African networks together to reimagine a plausible digital future in Africa. And out of this group futures process, we were able to develop stories that envision what that future looks like. These stories have been published in the Next Gen Foresight practitioners website that we will be sharing during the course of this dialogue. And they can be used in many different ways and by different audiences and stakeholders to inform policy, investment, and consumer behavior to disrupt the conversation around digital technologies in the continent. And today, our panel is gonna be giving us a deep dive into what that experience was like, what these visions are about, and what you could look forward to in the different stories that have been shared on this platform. So I want to take us straight into the conversation today, and I'm going to start with you, Iman. In March 2021, you were part of the group futures process, and I just want to invite you to share with us why you think the process that we went through in reimagining a different future for digital communities in Africa was important, and the outcomes from the cohort that you were part of, which was Kenya. Iman, please share with us your experience.
Thank you so much, Pasi. When it comes to why this project was particularly important, it's just it was a representation of the diversity that is on the continent. Because just from my country, Kenya, which is a cohort I was part of, it brought together 8 completely diverse youth, geographically, professionally, ethnically, from all over the country, and it brought us into one room, a virtual room, and we discussed through what our current reality is when it comes to the current digital reality is for all the African youth, the future that we want, the pitfalls that we foresee, and some of the challenges that we anticipate. And in doing that, I feel it was a representation of just how diverse our interests are and just how diverse our realities are, because when it comes to access to the digital space in Africa, there's so much difference between the access some geographical areas, some economic areas have as compared to others. It's just a startling difference when it comes to it, as well as what some of us imagine as a future. Some of us may see the digital future as a positive and just where we need to be, while others see it as something we need to be careful of and something that may lead us to some shortcomings that we may not be anticipating. On the outcome perspective, I feel like on my end, I'll talk about both the tangible and the intangible outcomes. With the tangible outcomes, I feel like it was a huge success because my project partner and I, Frank Ogola, we presented our project to the ELCOI 2021, the local conference of youth that was held here in Kenya. And it was just a room full of African youth with diverse voices, and we presented the future to them. And the feedback we got was amazing. We even got to meet a manifestation sort of our futures project, Agustino Neto, who's an African Kenyan politician who brought to light what we had anticipated. Our project, just to give a bit of a background, was based on running an ideological campaign in Kenya as opposed to an election campaign based on ethnicity and corruption and money and all these promises that politicians make, but one that is based on ideological issues, mostly climate change issues, environmental issues, renewable energy, the future that we want for ourselves, and managing to present it to a group of youth that was diverse. And the response we got was huge, and we got so many connections that it managed to hold people back at the conference even after the conference was over, which, you know, battling Nairobi traffic is a huge thing. So people to be so interested as to stay behind and have these conversations with us was huge. And maybe the intangible one I would say would be all the friendships and all the acquaintances I made during the project. And I got to meet so many African youth from all over the continent. I met some of them in person, which was amazing. And I feel like that was an amazing outcome as well. Thank you, Pasi.
Thank you, Iman, for sharing that, why it is important, why that process was important, and really what it was like to engage in it. Memunat, I want to invite you to take us a step back a little bit and maybe speak to us your entry point into the Digital Futures Project in Africa was from a research perspective. At the time, you were heavily involved as one of the members in the research process. And I just want you to take us through, why is digitalization important as a theme for the African continent? And you can share with us some of the research findings that you found at the time, and then just take us through why it is then important to think about the future of digitalization and even data governance, if you please, for the continent. Memunat.
Thank you, Pasi. I joined the NGFP initially as a assistant researcher, and it was exciting for me because it was something I've always wanted to do in terms of like having this kind of discussions but I never really saw myself as a participant because I assumed it would probably have this huge requirements and eligibility process. So in terms of digitalization, I think it is important because Africa as a continent there are lots of potentials for technologies and digital technologies to help like solve certain local solutions and help connect us and other things. But technologies don't just serve for good, they also like can have their potential is vast. It can be positive or negative. And currently everyone is like, oh, we're in a digital age, data age, information age. So there's lots of that going around, and we can see that is like the future too in terms of technology. And it is critical for us to start having the conversation now as to how do we design these technologies for our own benefits and to ensure our well-beings and our values as a community. And what was the other question now?
And I was just asking, why is it important for us to think about the future of digitalization for the continent?
Oh yeah, I think it is critical because our history has huge influence on our current context, and whatever we are doing currently will be influencing the future. So it is important for us to be thinking about it, not just for ourselves, but for the future generations, to be able to come up with like sustainable ways to use digital technology to improve our societies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Memunat. And one thing that strikes me as I look to invite you, Fisayo, to join the first round of this conversation is when the pandemic happened, 2020 was a very strange year for everybody across the world, because really the uncertainty of the pandemic and everything that happened, we really saw this huge exasperation of challenges within the continent and even across the world happening at a crossroad. And immediately we saw a lot of young people, not just young people, everybody losing their jobs, employment across the continent. We saw education and access to it changing and shifting, with a lot of the people who were able to learn virtually doing that. And that was just a few people, and a vast majority of the population not being able to access the internet or some of those digital technologies that enable different people to be able to work, connect, or even study online, and the kind of impact that had to the continent's young people. Now, Fisayo, I know you do a lot of work around rural areas, even though you're based in the farming sector, the agricultural sector of things. I just want you to talk to us a little bit about, in your opinion, in the areas that you work, how has this digital divide affected rural populations? And if you could link it a little bit with the work that we did with the Digital Futures project in Africa, that would be amazing. So Fisayo, I'm going to invite you to share with us your introductory remarks on this question.
Thank you so much, Pasi. So first thing that is really peculiar with rural residents is the fact that there is the digital divide, like you have mentioned. And because of this, it takes a lot of time before information actually gets to be stepped down to them. And when we look at it, before the people in rural communities even got to actually know what was happening around COVID, the lockdown and everything around it, it took time. So they did not have like adequate time to like really prepare for the eventualities of this. So all of a sudden, it just met them that there's going to be lockdown, unprepared. So when we take a look at what is happening like in the farming or agricultural sector, if I may, we'll see that most of the inputs that they use for their farming activities and the rest of them come from these semi-urban centers and urban centers and the rest of that. And due to the lockdown, we had like this restriction in movements. So because of restriction in movements, there was a decrease in influx of inputs that could actually get to them. So that actually impacted their livelihood a whole lot. And this was because this was even like coupled with the effect of climate change, because COVID with climate, the impact was massive. And the people that were like the actual recipients were people that are residents in these rural communities. And at the end of the day, because most of the food production that we have in Nigeria actually comes from rural communities, that also like led to the hike in prices of food items, even in urban centers. So when we look at the effect of COVID and how it affects urban system, rural communities, we would realize that it also has like a ripple effect in urban communities as well. So how does digital solution, how does it like really help with this and with our work? We're able to see that when we are trying to like develop solutions or like even think of the future of food or think of future of rural communities, all of these solutions that we are working on do not exist, or we cannot work on them in isolation. We have to like look into how can we bring this network together. So I don't know if I'm jumping the gun now, but I actually worked on the visioning of community visioning of food during the project, and that led me to like bringing in people that were residents in these rural communities and people that were residents in urban communities, and bringing them together, we're able to like get new insight as to how can technology even help us bridge this existing digital divide as regards information and the rest of them. And the insights that we're getting from these were like really interesting, because with progress on them, we're also able to see that what is like the way forward, what are like the next steps that we should be taking.
Thank you, Fisayo, for those insights. I want us to go into some of those stories, and it's perfect that the three of you represented here were aligned to 3 different stories from the various stories, about 13 of them that are showcased on the website, and we'll be sharing the link to the website with our audience here today. And Imad, I'm just going to come back to you, and just maybe as you'll be speaking, I'll just pop up the visualization for your story. I'm going to invite you to just tell us about the name of your vision of the digital future in Kenya. What challenge did your vision highlight? What are some of the issues that are being highlighted in your vision moving forward? And just highlight to us from that context of your vision, what are some of the key issues that we should be thinking about as we move into the future? And I know you touched a little bit on it with the upcoming elections in Kenya, but just take us through the story itself. What are the highlights, and what are some of the critical issues that it highlights for our thought as we move into the near future in the electoral cycle of the country? Iman.
Thank you, Pasi. Like I mentioned before, the project was something I'm super excited about. It was called the Green Party of Kenya Manifesto, which, as you can tell from the name, was a campaign manifesto that we had imagined set in the year 2030 in Kenya. And you may not know, or you may know this, but Kenya's election cycles are usually a very tense time for the country, full of anxiety, because elections bring up a lot of issues when it comes to ethnic tension and socioeconomic issues. So the Green Party of Kenya Manifesto 2030 is a reimagining of what Kenya's election space could look like. What if the campaigns were not fueled by ethnicity or corruption, but were fueled by citizens who have climate change at the very core of their interests, environmental interests, creating jobs for the youth through renewable energy investments, as well as the actual financing of renewable energy in conjunction with the youth in Kenya. So as we know, climate change and renewable energy are very huge factors when it comes to thinking about the future. Especially as Africans, we can't go without thinking about this. So the Green Party Manifesto played up this hope and this reality that we have as Kenyans of, is there a time when we could have a campaign fueled by the issues that are core to us? So like I mentioned, my campaign partner and I, Frank, we drew up this world where there was a re-election manifesto being read out to a public gathering from a pulpit where the politician was reading out the manifesto, and the manifesto had climate change at its core, environmental issues, investment in renewable energy, and involvement of the citizens when it comes to their right to vote. It's not just the political class steering the conversation in whatever way that is beneficial to them, but the community and the people and the person at the very lowest level of the totem pole has access to the correct information that they need to make the correct decision. So this party that we imagined had already run a successful campaign and was now vying for re-election, and they were bringing to light all the things that they had done, what we saw as correct. They had created thousands of jobs for African youth, and they had done this through generating investment and directing investment into renewable energy that yielded jobs for the youth. And then this also catapulted into ensuring that the youth have all the information they require to make the correct decisions, and therefore they're asking for a further election. So just this reimagination is what we presented, like I mentioned, to the local conference of youth last year. And there was a politician who has actually successfully run a campaign around this. He was sort of a model for what we had in mind. And this just shows to us that it wasn't just a complete ideation that we were creating a utopian life, but there is real life experiences, because there was somebody who has already done this before, and they have gone into politics, and they were in parliament. They were a former member of parliament, and they'd already done what we were imagining as the future of Kenya, but at a larger scale. So we hope that in a few years, Kenya will have elections that are not only ideologically driven, but they're safe and correct. And some of the visuals you can see on the screen, they're not just done in person, which is a slow process. It has a lot of complications. It can even be done through an election pager. You just beep in and you have your vote counted correctly. And you see some of the ideas we had around the ideology. So just this is sort of what we were playing with, and I'm glad to see that some of you guys in the chat are loving it. So thank you so much. Pasi, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Man. In just 1 minute, I'm gonna just have a follow-up question for you, because this is a very interesting artifact of the future that you developed for your story, and you call it the election pager. A lot of the elections in the continent, in the country, Kenya, we still have people who have to wake up, line up for long hours to be able to vote and get their vote counted and to really participate. Do you really feel, and what needs to be done so that we can leverage the power of technology and be able to have people have an election pager, merging electoral processes with technology to enable us to be able to believe in the power of technology, to enable us to be able to vote instantly from wherever we are, diaspora or in the country, and have our votes, counted and still transparent and fair. I just want you to speak a little bit to that, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just explain this artifact based on that follow-up question.
Thank you so much. This is also another super exciting thing. It's what we were calling an election pager, and it's a technology that we had imagined that would be freely available to every single person in Kenya over the legal voting age of 18 years, and it would be biometrically driven, where you just use your thumbprint to vote, which makes it easy and convenient and efficient instead of lining up, because in Kenya we have a history of lining up from morning till evening through the midday sun just to vote, casting your vote, and sometimes the voting polls are overloaded and they're unsafe, and you wait until the end of the polling time just for you to vote. And of course, in some areas it's not safe, and in some places the sun is too hot for the people to be standing out in the sun for hours. So this election pager is what we came up with as a solution for some of these challenges. And of course, we imagine some of the pitfalls that we may experience. The issues that we came up against was who owns these pages? How do we prevent election fraud? Because it would just be a matter of collecting as many pages as you could and just ask people to vote for you. So some of the issues we tried to work out, that the election pager would be freely available by the government, and it would be protected from malware to prevent hacking. It would also be biometrically charged to prevent people from having their pages stolen and being used for election fraud. So those are some of the challenges we tried to extrapolate and also solve. So I feel like that was a good representation of what we do in futures practice. Try and imagine a future, try and imagine the challenges that would come up with that future, and then try and solve them before they become a reality. So in just a few words, that's what the election pager was, and that's what we were imagining for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman. And just before I invite Memunat to speak about your vision, one thing that, one impact story, I mean, when this story was really looking to influence green political parties to wake up and activate, but also, impact the power of using technology to make elections free, fair, more transparent, and even easier in terms of methodology. We ended up influencing young people to then be the people who want to be the leaders who contend for political positions and using green ideologies and plugging in technology to be able to do that. And I'm happy to announce that we do have Anita Sorina, who was one of the young conference delegates who attended the fromKenya, who was inspired by this story and is currently running as the first green MP in the next upcoming elections at the age of 22. So we're wishing her all the best as she vies for that political seat as a young person. But I want to invite you, Memunat, also to share with us the vision that you and your partner came up with on the future of digital Africa. And I know your vision was called Towards Vision 2050. So Memunat, I invite you to share with us what are the highlights that your vision was highlighting in the Nigerian context. What are the key critical issues that we should think about? And what are some of the ideas for the future of digitalization that your story was bringing out? And as you unmute, I will be sharing with our audience your artifact from the future as well on the screen. Memunat.
Thank you, Percy. I guess to start with, I need to provide context on the situation of things as at that point. So when we were working on the vision, it was just after the NSAS protests that had happened in Nigeria, where the youths were protesting against police brutality in the country. And Nigeria is a very plural country. We have diverse tribes. We are divided by our tribe, gender, religion, lots of dimensions. And we see for the first time everybody coming together, irrespective of these different classes, towards a goal, a vision of a more secure country for the youths. So it was mostly the youths. And also currently, in terms of the African continent, Nigeria is one of the top countries in terms of digital technology development, solution development. And we see lots of our youths using digital technologies, social media, both the ones developed indigenous, in the continent and outside the continent. And we felt it is really important to talk about how as a nation, we can transition from where we are currently with all the challenges we are facing across sectors, both agricultural, education, safety, and other sectors, and transition towards a better country or a better society. And given our experience with socio-technical issues, we felt just building a technology to solve this was not going to be efficient. We were trying to look at ways in which we can involve communities and relevant stakeholders to join us in imagining and thinking about what steps can take us towards a more healthy future. And that's looking towards 2050. So as at the point we did it, it was last year, and our elections are coming up next year. So we also felt it is important to encourage the youth to go out and vote and to still believe in the electoral process. So we were just trying to like mash up all the current challenges in the society and try to see how collectively we can work together towards a better future. So for the story, we imagined it as a grandmother in 2050 who, as at like currently she's like still young, and she has experienced the past and experienced the transition, and now she's in the future with her grandkids, telling them the story about how it all happened. And we are seeing it as so we use the NSAS protest as a starting point, because personally that's the first time I saw the nation that's united, basically. So we thought that was like the huge signal of change we needed at that point, and so we use that as like the starting point for the vision. And our vision was basically touching on the current issues in the countries, and then trying to talk about how when the youths go out to vote, they can influence the policymakers, and the policymakers are like the powerful stakeholders when it comes to like making decisions about all the challenges we are currently facing, aside the fact that we as a community have to play our parts. And then so we were trying to tell the youths about the fact that if we can improve the kind of like, if we can even think beyond the things that divide us, like the gender, the tribes, and look beyond that to voting effective and efficient on people to like govern us, then we can start looking at how we can improve our education curriculum to teach the future generation about not just the current state of things, but also our past, and also help in that way to reconcile with our past and to help us heal together as a nation, but also to encourage the youths or the future generation to be able to like think and develop and innovate technologies. And then what else were we thinking about when we're talking about this? Yeah, I think it was mostly just like thinking about what is the leverage points here, and we're like, even if you develop application, this is like a nationwide problem, and it's some problems, and like we can build technologies, but some problems require more than just building technologies to solve them. And we were hoping that with the story we can ignite people's imagination and let them think about the potential possibilities and things we can achieve when we come together to solve problems collectively. And irrespective of our diverse backgrounds, we can all work towards a vision. And also I've forgotten what I wanted to say, but yeah,
it happens sometimes. But you've shared so much on what the vision was about, and see a lot of similarities with the Green political party manifesto. And I just want to bring to our audience's attention that the project was really focusing on two countries in the continent, Nigeria and Kenya, and just mirroring what's happening in terms of digitalization. What are young people thinking about when they think about how they can infuse digital technologies to impact the different challenges that the continent in its different contexts is going through. But at this point, and thank you so much, Memunat, for sharing the Nigerian context, and Iman also brought in the Kenyan context and the issues, massive challenges and issues with election periods in these both in both countries. I want to invite you, Fisayo, just to change the conversation a little bit, and then we will kind of have a last closing round before we get into Q&A with Jim, is to come and talk about your experience with the NGFP Award. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Award is an annual award that is presented to young people from around the world to share their innovative futures projects and ideas in their different countries, and to really put those forward for an award that they can then use, which is usually a prize award, to move upscale, strengthen their projects as they implement them. And Fisayo, you were the WalkAbout Prize winner last year. I just want you to talk to us briefly about the award and what has been your motivation for applying for this award every year. And while you do that, also share with us the Futures Challenge that your project idea for the award was looking to address, and what progress you have made thus far, and what we can expect as an impact to that project moving on into 2022 and beyond. Fisayo, I'm just going to give you like 4 minutes to take us through this.
I don't know why I feel like I'm getting the least time to talk about this, but thank you so much, Patty. All right. Thank you again, and I'm happy to hear you guys talk about your project. So about the NGFP WalkAbout Prize Award, so there are about 3 categories. We have a new category last year. Now we have 3 categories of awards that the NGFP network sponsors annually. The first is for the older people, while we have the middle category where I fall into to be for young people, and we also have the young voices of people below the age of 18. So the category that I got the award for is called the WalkAbout category, and there we have people between the ages of 18 to 25. And then I think the first time I had applied for the award, I was 22 at the time, first time of hearing about Foresight. Futures, as we call it interchangeably, I had no idea what that meant. But what I just knew was that I was not comfortable with the status quo, and I was just looking forward to what is different. And then I got to hear about the NGFP award, like, oh yeah, this is something I can actually try out. First application did not go through, and then somehow I became a part of the sensing network, getting constant information, being a part of the network and being in the loop, getting information as to, oh, these are like conversations that are ongoing. And I think there is nothing that really beats being in the same community with like-minded people. And eventually I applied again last year and I got in. So what I have been applying for year in, year out has been around working on a project with grassroots farmers, because I have my background in agriculture, and I also run an agribusiness, and that was what led me into understanding the rural context and what the day-to-day life activities of rural farmers really looks like. And with what I saw, I was just not comfortable with it, because I see people living from hand to mouth, and one of the 3 basic things that you cannot live without is food. So if you happen to be feeding people, you shouldn't be at the mercy of certain things. So which was why I thought about how can we begin to give these farmers that are feeding, not just for the present, but for the future, agency over their futures as well. So they are not just locked down in this loop of short-term thinking. How can they begin to think of, 10 years to come, 20 years to come, or even like thinking around generations to come? And that was how I came about the project, Farmers Futures Program. And because when you think of rural people, there is actually this digital divide that actually exists alongside access to information. They are just really cut off from all of those. And we have younger people that are really equipped with this knowledge, but the only restriction that we have is that they are not incentivized to, want to interact with this older generation of people, especially people in rural communities that are into food production. So how can we have people on the left and we have people on the right? How can we bridge this gap? And that is like the challenge that my project is trying to solve. So when we bring these 2 stakeholders together, how can we then facilitate collective actions to see that this is how we can work together, and then imagine the kind of future that we can begin to live for? And bringing them together is what my project really revolves around. And with the NGFP award, it is just such an amazing community because I have access to mentorship, people that have vast experience in this space prior to now. And then there is also like a funding prize as well, just to ensure that these ideas that I have are not just hanging in there, but I'm actually able to like implement them and then see the actions. So far so good. I have been working on putting the processes together to like see who are like people that are interested in this, or who are the people that are slightly interested but need just a little bit of nudging just to get them to be more interested and then carry out this action. Then eventually I'm able to like match them up with certain communities so that they can also have benefits of training that these young people actually have. So the stage that I'm currently at is actively seeking out these young people while also designing the futures process hand in hand. So I think at the end of the day, what we would be seeing is a mindset shift from, oh, I am living for the now to I am living for the tomorrow. So I am not just living for to produce food for now, but I'm also concerned about what are like the things that can happen, what are like the implications. If I do this now, what would happen eventually? And ultimately also bringing into account emerging issues around climate and the rest. So because you do not have adequate skills as regards how to grow food sustainably, you just grow the food anyhow. But with adequate information and agency, as I would like to call it, people are well informed, and then they are able to see that whatever actions that they take now has like an equal reaction eventually. So people also like take that into cognizance. So those are like the stages and the outcomes that I am looking forward to see at the end of the project. Thank you so much, Pasi.
Thank you, Fisayo. And to our listeners today, Fisayo, even though she was a WalkAbout Award winner, NGFP WalkAbout Award winner, she was also one of the people who developed collaboratively our futures story around digital Africa. And I'm not going to let you off the hook, Fisayo. I'm going to invite you for 1 minute to just explain to our audience very briefly. It's just 1 minute. You had a vision that you did together with Chiagozie Ude, and it was Journey to 2050, and you were centered. Your vision was about a people-centered Nigeria. And just from an African Union perspective, I'm going to pop one of your artifacts of the future up, and I just want you in 1 minute to explain to us what this artifact is. And I see in the middle of it, there's the People's Commission. In 1 minute, what does this artifact of the future tell our audience?
I am really excited to be talking about this. Okay, so what we have here is democracy in action, a people-centric system where policy is not just being imposed on people, but people actually contribute to the policy formation and policy creation systems. So what we have at the center of this, that as the People's Commission, is actually a system that collects people's idea, what their thoughts are, and then how they think systems should be running. They are able to like contribute this collectively. And at the end of the day, what we have is actually being translated to eventual policies that we have. So it ensures that every voice is heard, even in its tiniest bit. So I don't know if I exhausted my 1 minute, but that is just like a brief.
No, I mean, it is. And I think this is a very interesting artifact. It plugs in missing voices in policy formation and development in different parts of the continent. And that's why I asked you to speak a little bit towards it, which will lead us to our next question. And you will lead with this question, Fisayo, because we are we've just started with you. And again, I'm conscious of the time that we have together. But the question is, given the 3 different visions, and there are 13 more visions that I want to encourage our listeners to go and interact with on the website, it's what is the implication of the 3 different visions that you each developed in your groups or in your teams on policy, on tech societies, and communities? So what does policy have to do to see your visions come into fruition? what does tech society have to do, and how is this an impact to the community? And just as a wrap up, what are the seeds of change that we need to plant to really see these visions come into reality? So think about policy, tech societies, and communities as you speak towards this. And I'm going to allow just 3 minutes each. Fisayo, go for it.
All
so
right.
you said so you complained. So you're on the front line now.
Oh, I have all the time now. Thank you. All right. So personally, I am most concerned about voices unheard, right? And I think what our vision really speaks to is how can we ensure that we have all voices being heard? And that was why one of the reasons why we tagged our vision to be people-centric. So when we look at it, one of the things that leads to the divide is the way we carry out our electioneering process. And similar to what Memunat has in our own vision as well, we also have an e-voting system, a system whereby people can actually share, more or less like a decentralization of the system, such that the power does not belong to some big people up there. So I think in terms of technology, when we have the electronic voting system, that is like a way for us to like actually actualize the vision. And secondly, in terms of policy, we should be looking into like bringing in people that have like these ideas. For example, Chiagoze is like really heavily invested in policy. So how can we bring people like this that have these ideas and all of that, just to like revolutionize what we currently have and disrupting the status quo, so that we can have this new energy, new blood in our policy formulation. And lastly, I don't know what the last question, I don't remember what the last question was again. I don't know if I answered it.
No, you definitely have. And it was about what kind of seeds of change do we need to plant now to see these visions come into fruition. So in my head, I'm just thinking something like an artifact such as this is something that the African Union, for example, could look into, to influence a government across the continent to consider a more people-centered way of decision-making moving on into the future. And you've touched on that a lot. So thank you, Fisayo. I want to bring the conversation back to you, Iman, on the same question as Fisayo just answered. What are the implications of your vision of a digital Kenya on policy, tech societies, and the communities? And what seeds of change should we need to plant now collectively to see that vision come into fruition? Iman.
Thank you. On the community, I feel like I mentioned, the people need information in order to vote according to ideology, not according to ethnicity. If they have very limited knowledge, and this knowledge is being funneled to them by the political class, they'll have a very skewed version of things, and they'll vote according to their person, which in Swahili is mtuwao. So they'll just vote according to the person who has the most familiar face to them, speaks the most familiar language to them, as opposed to the person who speaks to the ideas that are most important to them. Or with regards to policy, I feel like Kenya is a very green country as it is already. Majority of our energy comes from renewable sources, and we have a very low carbon footprint. Unfortunately, politics is not driven by these green aspects. It's driven by other issues such as ethnicity and corruption and money and who's the most loud voice. So I feel like what this project means to policy is to have it led by the green issues that are so core to Kenya as a country, as opposed to the ethnic divides that most politicians latch onto. Lastly, when it comes to I think you asked about tech. The electronic pager is what was forefront when it comes to our envisioning of the future. To have an election that is led by technology, protected by technology, and made very efficient by technology would be what would allow Kenya to have a very easier election, because has been mentioned, 2022 is a political year for Kenya because we have elections in August. So just the tension that grips the country every time there's election would not exist if we had ideologically driven elections, because it would be that your campaign lost the election, not your tribe lost the election, or not your community lost the election. It's just your ideology, and it wouldn't lead to such tension as we used to. So when it comes to the seeds that we need to plant as of now, I feel like you just mentioned already, Pasi, the seeds have already been planted. We have slowly people coming out as youth voices that are driven by ideology as opposed to ethnic lines. We have campaigns purely based on ideology, not what region you come from, not what part of Kenya you're based in. So these seeds are already being planted, and I feel like we need to allow them to sprout into a future that Kenya can expect ideological campaigns and not ethnic campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman. And I'm trying to allow enough space for Q&A. So Memunat, on the same question, what are the implications on policy, tech societies? I'm guessing you will be speaking more on tech societies because that is your field and niche, and communities. And what kind of seeds of change do we need to be planting now to see these visions that we have put together as a network come into fruition? Memunat.
Thank you, Pasi. I think for the tech community, I'm starting with the tech community. I think first of all, we need to start thinking beyond, oh, there's a problem, we need to build a technology to solve this, and just try to think at a longer time frame about the impact of what you are trying to build. Who are you building it for? Am I still connected? Okay, yeah, it was kind of glitching. All right, yeah. So I think first of all, we need to start thinking about what assumptions and values are driving the way we develop technologies, and who are we developing the technology for. When we are deploying technologies in certain communities, we need to access and ask ourselves, did we do this technology for these communities? Are their safety and values ensured and embodied in this technology? And yeah, involving community members in technology design process to ensure that whatever solution we are building for them is really for them, and we are not creating more problems. So I try to solve some problems with technology. And also I feel the tech culture is heavily influenced by the Western values, and we need, as African tech solutionists, to start thinking about ways in which we can create our own tech culture reflects our values as a society. The other one was on community. For community, I think we just need to start having the conversation with community, ensuring they know about the potential problems and these issues, and involving them, hearing their voices and what they think, and also coming together irrespective of our diversity, diversifications, to work towards a shared goal. And for policy making, I think this one I'm going to lean more towards information and data technology. I think while African countries in general are really trying to develop policies, I think this is global. Policymakers are mostly reactive to in the way they create policies, and we need to start thinking proactively in terms of the policies we have in place, especially for digital technology, because it is always evolving and it is at a really fast rate, and it is kind of hard to keep up with the change. So we need to change our approach in terms of how we develop technologies and develop policies and regulate technologies. For the seeds, I think Africa is a very youthful continent. A high proportion of our population are the youths, and they are the majority of the people on the internet and the future of the continent, basically. So we need to start involving them in the conversation like the NGFP has done, and start encouraging them to think differently, and make sure they are they are knowledgeable about our past and our culture, and ensure like that carries on in how we approach problems or even like make sense of the world around us.
Thank you so much, Iman, Fisayo, and Memunat for sharing with our listeners today the stories and the insights. I'm going to be inviting Jim Garrison to take us to the Q&A. But before, Jim, you come back on, I just want to say that these stories were developed by 22 members of the NGFP African Network. We have shared the website with you. This is a visual representation of every member that participated in developing the 13 visions of a digital Africa. We've just finished the first phase, which is the envisioning, and the second phase is enacting these visions to see them coming to reality. And so we welcome anyone who's wishing to work with us, partner with us in doing exactly that, to not fear to reach out to us. But thank you for listening to us. And Jim, I welcome you back to take us into the next segment of the conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasi, and thank you all, Iman, Memunat, and Fisayo. This has been incredible. I think Deborah Perkins in our chat has called the session. It's one of the most inspiring Humanity Rising sessions that we've had. And so that's out of 416 sessions. So that gives you a measure of how enthusiastic people are for what you're doing, and the incredible intelligence and inspiration that you're bringing to the digitalization of Africa. So I just want to applaud you. Pasi, what a brilliant job convening and moderating. It's extraordinary, extraordinary. I don't remember being quite as smart or capable or anything when I was your age. So I just want to thank you all. And I want to ask a couple questions that have come in. One from Sarah Perkins, that, you know, as you have been enthusing about digital technology and so forth, I would love to have all of you comment on what certainly people in the United States and Europe, and I think India, China, and elsewhere, and it's just wanted to test how true it is in Africa, on the shadow side of digital technology. Because what the experiences have been, which has really been encapsulated in the Netflix movie, if you've seen it, called Social Dilemma, is that the promise of the internet and sort of all things digital has been corroded by the manipulation of the consumers and the data through the algorithms of Facebook and Google to actually create division and silos and hatred between groups, as the algorithms reinforce what the algorithms think that you believe, and whether it's true or not. And so there's a major global discussion around how do you now begin to regulate digital technology, given the fact that it has been manipulated in such divisive ways. So I would just love to hear your comment, because you're really energetically, you know, working on a decade-long plan around digitalization. I mean, what do you think about this? Are you doing anything about it? Speak to us about the kind of the social dilemma that is inherent in digital technology. Maybe starting with you, Iman.
Yeah, thank you for that amazing question, because like I mentioned, when we were working through some of the futures, we tried to anticipate some of the challenges we would face and some of the pitfalls that we would potentially fall into if we're not careful. And some of the issues we had to grapple with was balancing the tightrope between digital regulation and digital freedom. because the internet, like any other civic space, is a space that can be used for both good and bad, I guess. It can allow people to express themselves politically and to find like-minded people who they can then develop their ideology and develop their rhetoric. But at the same time, it could easily turn into a space of misinformation and spewing hatred and leading to a lot of issues, especially when it comes to campaigns and elections, because slowly by slowly, digital platforms are being used as election platforms, and they're being used to spread personal campaigns and political campaigns. So walking this tightrope needs to be guided by firm regulation by the policymakers, and these regulations have to be along lines of ensuring the Constitution is represented, because the Constitution has both provisions for freedom of speech and freedom of association and freedom of spreading whatever ideology you have, while ensuring you don't spread hatred and don't bring any ethnic tension and any don't spew hate speech, essentially. So the same policy regulations that were used when creating the Constitution in Kenya in 2010 is what needs to be extrapolated into regulating the digital space. In Kenya, we have an act that was created in 2013, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. So this begins just to, chip at the huge ice block of regulating the digital space, where it prevents crimes when it comes to the online platform. But while this mostly focuses on money laundering and crimes that are of I guess monetary nature, it doesn't focus on protecting the civic space from misinformation and spewing of hate. So the same concepts that were used in the Constitution, I feel, should be extrapolated in regulating the digital space.
Thank you. Memonat, do you have anything you want to add?
I think in terms of like the impact of big tech companies on nations, I think even in African nations, like for Kenya and Nigeria, when the Cambridge Analytica hack happened and everything, we got to realize afterwards that Cambridge Analytica through Facebook influenced some elections in Nigeria and Kenya too. So it's like the impact is global, which is one of the impacts of globalization in the first place. So I think for like African societies, we need to start thinking about how we create assessment frameworks when we before tech are deployed in our societies. How do we assess it to ensure that our values, our well-being, our safety is ensured and has been considered in the design and development of the systems? And because mostly, I think historically, most technologies originally are always imported from developed and Western nations to African nations. And now we need to start thinking, because with digital technologies, the impact is not localized, it is everywhere, and the consequences can be very huge. So we need to start thinking about all this proactively before we even use or allow systems to be accessed in our countries. But I'm also worried, Iman has mentioned about is it dictatorship or I don't know, restrictions. So we just need to find a way to find a balance between ensuring people have their freedom, but also ensuring our collective safety and our well-being in the technologies we allow here or the technologies we develop ourselves here. What we are doing, I think one of the projects that I started working on after the NGFP program was, I'm currently working on a project where I and my partner, we are going to be creating awareness, especially among the youths. We are focusing on university students right now, because we feel, like you've mentioned, Jim, the promises of technology, that is what everybody hears. but they are like negative consequences and implications at a very large scale that people are not really talking about when they are advocating the use of these technologies. So for us, what we are aiming to achieve is to be able to like enlighten and educate the youths on both the positive and the negative implications of technologies, and then encourage them to imagine, given their societies and their different values, what are the better ways to design the system for their community, because we believe they are the future solutionists of the continent, and we think we need to start involving them in the conversation and helping with their imaginations and just thinking beyond what is currently.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Fisayo.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Jim. So I agree with what Memunat and Imana talked about, but I also wanted to speak to the fact that some of the things that we have spoken to today are just like at the superficial level of the work that actually went into bringing these visions and artifacts together. So with the design of the artifacts, right, there were salient questions that we had answered. For example, coming up with artifacts around the People's Commission. We had asked and answered questions like who owns the system, spoken to how is it controlled, how is it being used, how do we, what type of governance system is really around it. So some of these fundamental questions have actually been burning in our hearts as well while we're designing this. And I think as we look into bringing all of these things to life, those are questions that would also have to revisit and then ensure, because all of these are not things that we can single-handedly work on while bringing it to life. We have to also work with other partners and then constantly answer this question in different ways, using our own different ideas to see how can we ensure that there is data protection, there is the governance system is transparent, and then also ensure that there is no form of corruption. And even while we're answering some of those questions, we also looked at what are the even environmental impacts of all of this, because we look at what are the types of materials that we are going to be using in bringing some of these technologies to life. So I just wanted to bring in that nuance into the conversation. Thank you.
Very important point. Passy, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Jim. I mean, briefly, I think there were 6 key priorities that emerged when we were working on this project that touches on the question that you've asked, Jim, which is very important. And the first one was that data and the digital technologies, they need to be seen as a collective resource for public good, rather than just a good that benefits the interests of certain institutions or individuals. So that was one, and even how they're regulated. So data protection, and my colleagues have spoken a little bit about that. The second principle was we need to start seeing data and the use of digital technologies as a tool to support good governance. So far, what we have seen is the use of data and digital technologies for digital surveillance and to monitor what people are doing and how they're doing it, and also to support a lot of, some of the intransparent and corruptions and manipulations that happen within different government institutions and big tech players out there. But we need to begin using data to support good governance, accountability, transparency, and direct democracy. So that was the second principle we saw. The third one was a bio-internet and connectivity. And this was really, how do we begin to connect data to the natural world, and how can we see that technology becomes an additive and not an extractive to nature and the environment? Because we see a lot of technologies coming up, linking them to nature, but we need to really see how it's adding rather than taking away. The fourth principle was that we need to see technology as a way back and not just as a way forward. We should be able to go back and really be able to interact. And from an African context, globalization has tended to wipe away, but we really want to see technology being used to preserve our languages, our practices, our cultures, and our traditions, and being able to go back and see that. And the final two is we need to use data and technology for sincere, humane, and co-designing together rather than exasperating the digital divide, and finally, adding to the missing voices. How can we use data and technology to also plug in missing voices, those who are marginalized, heavily impacted by different situations, who never get to be heard or to be seen, but are affected by the various challenges that we continue to experience globally and even at national context, regional levels. So those were the 6 priorities that came into mind when we were working on this project that answer some of your questions, Jim. Thank you.
You 4 women are absolutely amazing. I just want to say, it's an inspiration at a very deep level to all of us. And that leads me to my final question. You know, the continent of Africa has endured so much pain and suffering at the hands of the colonial powers for many, many centuries. And yet, as you exemplify, there's a vibrancy and a capacity and an audacity, I would say, about the future that you embody so powerfully. And I want to bring in a final question from Deanna Rice. You know, as you young women look at the future as Africans, what's the most beautiful thing you can dream about the future of your nations and the future of that continent? Fisayo, let's start with you.
Well, Jim, that caught me by surprise. I did not see that coming. But while you were bringing the question on, I was just thinking about the people, because I think the strength and the beauty of Africa is in the people. Yes. I think we are yet to like really harness the power of our people, and that's like the most beautiful thing that I see in Africa. And then when you take a look at the 4 ladies that we have on call, I'm sure you can resonate with the people of African continent.
Beautiful, beautiful. Memonat.
Oh, okay. Like Fisayo, what came to my mind was people, and people in terms of how creative and talented we are, and with enabling infrastructure, resources, environments, I can't imagine what we can accomplish as people. And also we are very like hospitable and lovely people who are divided by race, tribes, religion, and other dimension. And I just can't imagine, like, okay, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like if we can come together beyond these differences, unite towards our shared values and goals, and just doing things for us, by us. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Iman.
Thank you. My original answer was it's diversity, but people have already mentioned that. So I'll go with it's young people, because like you mentioned, all of the painful history that Africa has endured, I feel like the young people are sort of, I don't say unmarred by it, but they're a bit further from it than the older generations. So that brings with it like a wide-eyed, bushy-tailed experience that allows us to just come up with these utopian ideas and say, why not? You know, what's stopping us? As opposed to some of the older generations that had a bit of some of the realities they experienced was a lot different from ours. So with the younger generation, we just have this this ability to dream, I guess, and some may call it, you know, daydreaming or unrealisticness. And I feel like that in itself is our strength, the fact that our dreams are so absurd sometimes that people say, you know, this is not possible and this is not realistic, and that is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, that spout says it all. Beautiful, beautiful. Passy, final word.
Final word, I mean, Jim, you said my favorite word. is audacity. If you ever ask me my favorite English word, it's audacity. And that is really something that we need to have so that we're not constantly anchored to the ground, that we're actually being able to rise up and soar. And that takes a lot of zeal, commitment, collectivity, and unity in the spirit of Ubuntu, which is a principle in the African context, which is coming together to deliver and to solve our problems collectively rather than from an individual basis. And my colleagues have talked about the power of youth, the power to ideate beyond just the present challenges. And I think that is it for me. I just shared on the chat, when the pandemic hit, it kind of felt like the world was coming to an end. But you really need to look at the response of young people, especially from the continent when this happened. For them, it was about innovation. How do we survive? What do we need to do? Fine, we're not able to go to school. We've lost our jobs. How do we ideate beyond this? We saw a lot of young people moving back to their rural areas and going into farming so that they can plant food and sell it and make an income from it. We've seen a lot of young innovators coming on and solving some of the challenges we've seen. We're seeing young people going into e-mobility in the continent and developing electric motorcycles and learning from other innovators and really taking advantage of the power of connectivity, the internet, free learning resources, self-teaching, self-learning, and really being the ones who are also teaching those ones who do not have access to these things. And this happens also when we're able to come together, as we have been doing as an NGFP Africa network, to ideate, to reimagine, to support each other, to go on with courage, influence policy, influence market, influence private sector, influence behavior change, and really fight with the audacity of saying to actually see the vision that we want to see for our communities, for our countries, and for the planet at large. So that really is it for me. The power has to come internally, but we have to work together to actually see it happen. It does not come overnight. It takes hard work and commitment and zeal and audacity. And that's why we are here today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Audacity is what's empowering humanity rising, actually, in the midst of all the craziness of the world. And just as a personal note, you're reminding me as you're telling your stories of one of the most amazing and audacious adventures I ever had. When I was a young man, about your age, actually, I was in my early 20s. I was studying Middle Eastern affairs at the University of Tel Aviv. And we had a 6-week break right in the middle of the year. And so a friend of mine and I flew to Addis Ababa. And then we hitchhiked from Addis all the way down to Nairobi. And then we hitchhiked around the different game reserves. And we ended up, Iman, you'll probably remember, to the island of Lamu, off the coast of Kenya, and had the most unbelievable time I think I may have ever had in my whole life. It was audacious for sure, and it was a wonderful, wonderful adventure, as a young person to a faraway land that I didn't know very much about, but was so astonishingly colorful and friendly and powerfully deep in the rhythm of its life form that I've never forgotten the experience. And so today, listening and experiencing you, that memories come up for me. So I wanted to just share it at the end by way of thanking you very, very deeply, all four of you. And with your permission, I'd like to be in touch because I'd like to, maybe explore more. For example, Iman, and who's the other one from Kenya? Is that Memunat?
That would be me.
Oh, Pasi.
Pasi, yes.
Pasi. I just heard, for example, about the Maasai, and there's a situation where thousands of Maasai might be forced off the land for reasons of encroachment. That Avaz has been mobilizing a global signature campaign. So maybe down the road, I'd love to have you back to talk about other issues. What's it like being a young woman in your countries? What's it like to experience the cultural foment in your various countries? So if that'd be at all of interest, I know you could speak very powerfully about issues other than the digitalization of Africa, and would like to have you back on Humanity Rising. So thank you very much. This has been inspiring. And then on Monday, everyone, we're going to turn our attention to the great poet Rainer Maria Rilke. It's the 100th anniversary of his channeling of his great poems. And so we're going to have a German scholar and a world specialist on Rainer Maria Rilke speaking to us on Monday. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. You're all welcome to the after chat session. If you have time to join, Stan will put the link in the chat box, and we'll see you there. But thank you all, Pasi, Iman, Mimonat, and Fisayo. You've been wonderful and inspiring, and look forward to having you back. Okay, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Iman, Mimonat, Fisayo.
Brilliant session. Brilliant session.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Everyone, thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, bye. Good night.